Hi, my name's Adrian Spender. I'm the tech lead of the metadata team in the FT, and this is my FT Hack Day project. So we have loads of metadata in the FT. We have big taxonomies of companies and people and the sections of the paper and the website and so on and so forth. And we're very good at tagging content with this metadata, but we're not so good at being able to get it back out again. So this is a very much a technology-led hack where I wanted to play around with a graph database, namely Neo4j, and a couple of other bits of technology, and just see what we could do with this metadata in a graph database and what kind of interesting things could we get out of it. So here's a typical taxonomy. In this case it's our sections taxonomy, which is really the navigation structure of the website. So we have a taxonomy, it has terms in it. And those terms have subterms, so world is broken down into US and Europe, Europe's broken down into UK, and so on and so forth. So we have a kind of graph structure, hierarchical structure in our taxonomy, so it lends itself to being in a graph database. So I wanted to figure out a graph structure that works for our taxonomical data, and then work out how to get our taxonomical data out of the system that it exists in at the moment into the graph database. So I had to write tools to do that. And then, because it's Hack Day and you want to show something cool, I wanted to just write a simple visualization that will take that data and do something interesting with it. So here's what I ended up doing. So I took our sections taxonomy and represented it in the graph. That was fairly easy. And then I took a load of article data and metadata about those articles and also put that into the graph as well. So any article can be tagged with terms from a taxonomy. And importantly, it can be tagged with multiple terms. So here, this article has been tagged with 3 different sections. It's been tagged with UK, but it's also been tagged with world, which is a parent of UK, and it's also been tagged with companies. So what I started to think about was, if you just take the top level taxonomies, in this case world, Lex and companies, how can I get a count, how can I use a graph to get a count of all of the articles that exist in that term or any of its children term, but making sure that count is unique. So for example, in this case, if I got a count of world, the count would be 1 because there's 1 article. The fact that it's tagged twice in that taxonomy subtree is irrelevant. I just want the count of all of the unique ones. So I started playing around with Neo4j and tweeted a bit about the fact that I was doing so, and a guy called Jim Webber, who's the chief scientist of Neo Technologies, who have their headquarters just around the corner from the FT, saw that and he offered to come on site and help. So he came after he'd had some lunch and sat down with me for about 15 minutes and we had a good chat and he helped me with some of my queries. So here's an example of what the sections taxonomy looks like. So this is looking at using a tool called NeoClipse. You can see I have a top level taxonomy type and term types within those. These represent our top level terms, and each of those, if you clicked on them, would have children that represent the subterms within that top level term as well. And then it was a case of working out what my query would be. And the way that the querying works in Neo4j using a technology called Cypher is pretty cool. So it's not like SQL, you say where you want to start in the node and then you match against relationships between things. So in this case I'm starting at the sections node, which is node 1. I'm finding everything that has a relationship to that of in taxonomy, calling those things terms. I'm then taking everything that is a child of that term up to a depth of 3. Then I'm looking at all of this and saying I want to find everything that's tagged with, call that an article, and then finally return the term name and the count of distinct articles. So if we swap over to this, which is the Neo4j web admin, I have that query in here and I can execute it, and very quickly it returns me exactly what I'm looking for. So for example, in the Lex taxonomy here, there are 109 distinct articles. So that's 109 that are either tagged with Lex or tagged with a child term such as best of Lex. Same for world, there are 1,385. I imported about 4,000 articles into my data set. Okay, so the next thing to do, once we've got that running query, is obviously to make it look pretty, because it's a hack day. So I wrote a little web app that will take that query, run it, and turn it into some JSON, and then I use the D3 JavaScript visualization library to turn it into a nice looking bubble chart. So here we can go and load my bubble chart, and it takes a couple of seconds, and here you can see all of the top level terms in this taxonomy, such as markets, companies, world. You can hover over and see the number of unique articles, and obviously the bubbles are sized according to the number of unique articles in that top level term. So that was my kind of really quick hacky way of trying to do something useful with this data, but there are lots of other possibilities. So one that I wanted to do but didn't really get the time to was take, for example, our people taxonomy that allows us to tag articles based on who those articles are about, and do some interesting things like link that into our company's taxonomy. So we know we have lots of articles about Steve Jobs, lots of articles about Tim Cook, and we have lots of articles about Apple. But for example, how can we do something like find all of the articles about the CEO of Apple? We know about Steve Jobs and Tim Cook, we know about Apple, but we don't know that Steve Jobs and Tim Cook are or were CEOs of Apple. So the graph database would allow us to do that by, for example, creating a relationship between a person and a company, and we could call that relationship a CEO relationship. And what's more, relationships can have properties, so we can say when that relationship started. So we could give it a start date of, for example, July 1997, which is when Steve Jobs rejoined Apple. And then we could use the query language to build queries that would allow us to do things like returning all of the articles for people who were CEO of Apple between July 1997 and today. And potentially that allows us to then do really interesting visualizations or renderings of the website, or lists of articles based on really useful ways of interpreting the metadata, the rich metadata that we have in the FT. So that's my hack. Thanks for watching, and I hope that's been useful.